Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and this is kind of part two of a two-part series. Last week I did a video about cooperative games that present a puzzle for players to solve together, but you're not pitted against the game itself. The game is not punishing you, doing anything against you, not antagonizing you. But today I'm doing the opposite. Today I'm talking about cooperative games that do antagonize you, where players are cooperating together to compete against the game itself and try to outwit the game and withstand the punishment the game gives you. This is not my preferred style of cooperative game, but it's still a big list. I have a lot of games to mention today because there are a lot of games in this genre and some games that I really love in this genre. So let's see, I'll jump right in to a couple different quick lists up front. Games mentioned by Stonemaier ambassadors in this category that I haven't played. And there are many games in this category. These are only the ones that were mentioned by our ambassadors as some of their favorites. Are Dead Men Tell No Tales, Horrified, Zombicide, and Legends of Andor. Games mentioned by ambassadors that I have played but wouldn't count as even honorable mentions. For me personally, I know you might differ on this. I'm going to list some big hitters here, so be ready. These are games that I respect, I appreciate, but do not make my honorable mention list. Are Gloomhaven, Arkham Horror LCG, Eldritch Horror, Battlestar Galactica, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Ghost Stories, Journeys in Middle-earth, Marvel Champions, Pandemic, Robinson Crusoe, Yggdrasil, The Big Book of Madness, and Tainted Grail. All games that have amazing mechanisms in them. They just weren't for me. Honorable mentions that were for me are Spirit Island, Solar Storm, The Reckoners, 5 Minute Dungeon, Marvel Legendary, Dead of Winter, Trogdor, Set a Watch, Atlantis Rising, Terra, The Captain is Dead, Sentinels of the Multiverse, Hero Realms, The Seventh Continent, and Forgotten Waters. And then I have another list of top honorable mentions. Again, there are lots of games in this category. These are games that came very close to making the top 10 list. Are Aeon's End Legacy, Legendary Encounters Alien, Orleans Invasion, Mansions of Madness, Mechs vs. Minions, and Flip Ships. Now on to the top 10. And in this top 10, I will talk about some of the kind of the pros and cons of this style of cooperative game. Let's jump in with Pandemic Legacy Season 0. So I had Pandemic on my list of games that I think are just fine. I think Pandemic is almost, other than miniature games, Pandemic is almost the godfather of this style of game. There are a few games that are slightly older than it, but Pandemic was the one that was a big hit of this style of game where the game is constantly doing bad things that you have to deal with. You have to clean up, you have to fix, you have to solve. And Pandemic Legacy is probably my favorite of all the Pandemics. I also really like the Cthulhu one, but Pandemic Legacy Season 0 in particular I thought was fantastic because of all the different puzzles it asked players to solve and all the tools it gave players to mitigate all the bad stuff that happens, the story it tells, and also the ability to fail forward. So even if you don't quite finish all the goals for a certain scenario, you can still move forward. You don't have to repeat the month necessarily. I really like that about the campaign of Pandemic Legacy Season 0. And so, yeah, that's I wanted to include one Pandemic on this list, and this would be the one that I would include here. So that's number 10, Pandemic Legacy Season 0. At number 9 is Legacy of Dragonholt. Now this, along with a few other ones on the list, came very close to making my other list, because Legacy of Dragonholt gives players a lot of agency, and the game is rarely, like the game doesn't have, there are no event cards like in Pandemic, there's no like bad stuff just happens off to the side and you have to deal with it. And Legacy of Dragonholt, you go exploring. You have a storybook and you choose an adventure to go on, and you go out and you go on that adventure. However, during that adventure, bad things are happening that you have to deal with. You are encountering things that are antagonizing you, and you have to deal with those things. Pretty fine line here, I think, between this style of game and games like, I don't know, Just One, The Mind, and Mysterium. Those are some of the ones that I was talking about on the other list. But Legacy of Dragonholt, I think, is just a wonderful storytelling game where the mechanisms are solid. You don't need dice or anything. You just have skills with your character, and if you have a certain skill, you can make a choice. If you don't have that skill, you can't make that choice. And while the game is antagonizing you a little bit, it is mostly you deciding what you want to do. And I think that's wonderful about this style of game, because I think many of these styles of games take a lot of agency away from the players. Your job becomes to mitigate a bunch of bad stuff and deal with a bunch of bad stuff. But Legacy of Dragonholt is so freeing. You can do pretty much whatever you want in the game, and I love that level of agency in a cooperative game of this genre. So that's Legacy of Dragonholt at number 9. At number 8 is Summit. I have Summit here. Summit is a game that is both competitive and cooperative. I've only played the cooperative version because I love the cooperative version. And you are just climbing a mountain together. And includes two really important things that elevate it for me as a game. One is this this leapfrog mechanism, where as you are trying to climb up this mountain, you can you can skip over spaces that another player is on. So you are actively helping each other climb up this mountain. The other element of it are the event cards. I think Summit does event cards really, really well because they are fun and outlandish and crazy and very thematic and very memorable. I think if you're going to put event cards in the game to make it more thematic, I think it's worth making them as memorable as possible. Don't make a bunch of event cards that kind of seem the same. Make them very distinct and outlandish, and Summit does that really, really well. Outlandish, but still thematic for the theme of climbing up a mountain, a very cold, tall mountain. Summit is still very much a struggle against the game. You have to deal with the climate. You have to deal with these events that are happening. You have to deal with how much you're carrying, your food, your oxygen, all that stuff. But I really enjoy it, and that's why Summit is the number 8 game on this list. The number 7 game on this list is, I think, the first one with a trader, and that is Shadows over Camelot. Maybe this is the only one with a trader on here. Yeah, it is. So Shadows over Camelot is a Knights of the King Arthur themed game. I love the theme. I love the little puzzles that you go out and solve in the game, and you're trying to decide, do I solve this puzzle alone? Do I get help from other players to help me solve this puzzle? The core mechanisms are very simple. Each mini game is its own thing, but you're just using cards from your hand to solve those mini games. And there could be a traitor, but there may not be a traitor. You don't really know when you play Shadows over Camelot. I love that mystery of whether or not there is a traitor among you. And that trader does, where in many of these games, I think they do have alpha player problems because information is fairly public in all of these games. But Shadows over Camelot, because of that trader aspect, avoids that. There's a reason to keep your cards hidden beyond just the game telling you to. And you are constantly kind of wondering, are the players I'm partnering with actually with me? Are they actually supporting me? And they're wondering the same thing about you. So I really like Shadows over Camelot. That's my number 7 game on this list. And number 6 is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. This is another campaign game. I do enjoy the campaign aspect of this game, but just what I was thinking about games that I really enjoy in this genre, I really just had a good time playing Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I like the deck building. It's very simple deck building, but it feels good. I like that you can get stunned in the game, but you don't die. So even though bad things can happen and you can get hurt, you don't die in the game. You survive. You just go on and continue to play. And I do like the escalation of the different characters that you're struggling against, the bad cards that are in the deck that you're fighting against from level to level in Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I think if you like Harry Potter and you like deck building, I think this is a great game to check out. And it is definitely a cooperative game in this genre of punishing games where you're fighting against the game, against the AI, that I still really enjoy. So that's Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. Next up is Forbidden Desert. So this is a very puzzly game, as are a couple of the other games coming up here. Very puzzly game, but it is still very much in this category of bad things. The game is going to do bad things to you every turn. And in this game, the form of that is that you have these sand tiles. You have these sand cards that come up, and they're represented by these tiles on the board. And as you are trying to uncover and dig up all these artifacts and dig up your crashed ship and things like that, the game is actively covering those things with sand. So you're constantly struggling against the game. But it is a really neat puzzle to solve together in terms of how you find your airship and get out of the desert. I'll mention here that one of the things about these types of games is that they can be a little demoralizing. And I think that's maybe the top downside for me when I think of these style of games where you're fighting against the game. Because in Forbidden Desert, you can spend your whole turn digging up sand on a few tiles and then flip a card that immediately puts that sand right back on those tiles. You don't have control over that. You didn't know it was coming. And it's just, sometimes it can feel like a real uphill battle. I still love the puzzle in Forbidden Desert, but I mentioned that as an overarching thing to think about if you are designing a cooperative game where players are struggling against the game. Definitely give them moments of hope. I think Forbidden Desert does that really well, but keep an eye on how demoralizing the game is, because I think you can have a game where you're struggling against the game, where the game is a little punishing, that isn't entirely demoralizing. You might need to look at the other category of cooperative games I talked about last week for more of that, though. That's Forbidden Desert, my number 5. Burgle Brothers is my number 4. Burgle Brothers, here's Burgle Brothers. Nice, tidy little box. This is a heist game. This is my favorite heist game. You are cooperating with a bunch of different players as you go into a building and try to pull off a heist. Again, it's a very puzzly game. You are moving characters around. You're deciding to move blindly onto a tile or look at that tile first. If you find a safe, you have to crack that safe by rolling some dice, usually with other players. And there's some fun things that can happen in this game. I actually just got Burgle Brothers 2. I'm pointing at my pile of unwrapped games, but I'm really looking forward to trying that very soon. And that might be better than this. I don't know, but this is already high up on the list. Burgle Brothers number 4. And one thing I want to mention about this is that I love the manipulation of the AI in this game. So if you're going to have an AI, and a lot of these games do have an AI that require you to maintain the AI, make it pretty streamlined. Make it as streamlined as possible, because I think players are a lot more interested in making their own decisions rather than doing something on behalf of the AI, on behalf of the game. Burgle Brothers makes that really easy, but it also lets you manipulate this, because you can kind of set off, you're trying to avoid a guard that's going around each floor and trying to, and maybe capturing players or finding the players. But you get to manipulate that guard. They have their own route that they'll take, but you can set off an alarm at a certain place. If you know the guard's route, because you know the guard's route, you know where they're going to move, they're moving towards a certain alarm. And if you have a player that's in between the guard and the alarm, you might change the guard's alarm so that they'll move in a different way. And I love that ability to manipulate the guard. I love how that's part of the puzzle in Burgle Brothers. And that's why it's my number 4. My number 3 is one of the most recent games I've played, and that is Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods is an open world cooperative campaign game where you're controlling a bunch of different characters that are going out and exploring a world. I mean, it is wide open. You can sail a ship in pretty much any direction, and the game is largely quest driven, where you'll arrive at a location, you'll look up that location in the storybook, you'll read a passage, and typically you'll get a quest, and then you'll figure out how to solve that quest. It doesn't tell you exactly where to go, but it gives you some clues. And along the way, there is some combat. Combat is kind of a feature of a lot of these games, maybe not the ones on my list as much, but a lot of these games where you're fighting against the game includes actual combat. And I love the puzzly combat in Sleeping Gods. It's one of the types of combat that is so puzzly that I really enjoy it. And I like that you can also avoid it. Like, it is not the core feature of the game. Exploration is the core feature of the game. The quest is the core feature. Combat is just something that happens every now and then, and there's a fun well-designed puzzle behind it. I'm just incredibly impressed by what Ryan Lockett pulled off with Sleeping Gods, and I really enjoy it. I played through one campaign, but there's still a lot more to do in the game, so I look forward to revisiting it for another campaign in the future. That is Sleeping Gods, my number 3 game on this list. In Shards of Infinity, Shadow of Salvation, this is my number 2 game on this list. Shards of Infinity is a cooperative dueling or competitive dueling game. However, there is a cooperative expansion that is fantastic, and that is Shadow of Salvation. This is one where players are working together, taking nearly simultaneous turns to fight against a boss in a mini campaign in Shadows of Salvation. So I believe it's 3 or 4 games. It's a very short campaign. But I actually like that. I like that it's a very short campaign. Each boss is designed very differently, and each boss has their own set of cards that you'll then shuffle together with 2 other specific sets of cards. You'll shuffle them all together to form this deck of bad guys that you are fighting against. So rather than in normal shards, you're fighting against the other player, reducing their health. In this case, you are reducing the health of the bad guy and all of their minions. And just I think that the reason I love it so much, because of the shortness of the campaign, that is short, streamlined. The unique bosses are really interesting, and because of the core gameplay of Shards of Infinity, I just really happen to enjoy this type of deck building. It's a really, really great form of deck building in Shards of Infinity. And we just had a blast playing through the campaign. We loved the campaign so much that we went through and played it again, playing all the bosses that we didn't fight the first time, and I really enjoyed that. It certainly is a game where some tough things can come out that you have to deal with. Like, the game it's a constant barrage against you. You're rarely getting a reprieve against the big boss. But that's the point of the game. It is a struggle. When you play this, you're opting into fighting against a big boss. And that is the nature of the game. So knowing that going into Shadows of Salvation, knowing that I can work together with, say, Megan to compete against the boss, I do really, really enjoy the cooperative expansion for Shards of Infinity, Shadow of Salvation. That's my number 2. At number 1, And actually, before I jump into the number one, the one thing I haven't mentioned here is I mentioned like managing the AI with Burger Brothers, but again, I want to stress that because I think a lot of cooperative games ask you to do a lot to manage the AI, whether it's drawing event cards and enacting them, or managing whatever the AI is doing, their monsters, their creatures, whatever they're doing, and I think this is maybe one of the top two reasons, other than punishment and demoralization, that I generally stay away from this style of game because I don't want to spend a lot of time managing an AI. I don't want things to happen to me. I want to make choices that have an impact on the game. And the reason I'm saying this before my number one is my number one, Time Stories, gives you full agency to go out and do pretty much whatever you want in the game. In Time Stories, it's scenario based. You were dropped into a weird period of time, past or present, with a fantastical speculative element to it, and you have to typically solve a mystery and accomplish a mission. But you just go out and do it. There aren't things approaching you and happening to you along the way. You are saying, I want to go here, and you go there and you make choices there. And that I really, really love about a few of this style of cooperative game. There aren't a ton of them. A lot of these have stuff that happens to you. I prefer the Time Stories option and the Legacy of Dragonhold option, where you go out and make things happen and deal with the consequences and repercussions of the choices that you make. That gives me a sense of agency. It means that I don't have to manage an AI along the way. I don't have to manage something else. I'm making choices for myself. And I think that's one of the reasons, other than the amazing theatrical experience of Time Stories, that I continue to return to Time Stories and continue to love it. Because I'm the one making the choices. We are the ones making the choices. And along the way, Time Stories also has one of the things that I love about the other category of cooperative games, which is limited information. When you show up at a location in Time Stories, you each pick a certain card at that location that you want to look into. Like you want to go over into that corner of the room. And you do that. You kind of, not physically do it, but you pick up a card that represents that corner of the room, and you alone look at it. You alone look at the art on the back of it, and you alone read it. And then you put it back down and you talk about it with the other players. So there is limited information. You might have missed something really important on that card. And so it really is important for you to read it and absorb it, and then find a great way to communicate that to the other players. And I love that about Time Stories. Also love the art. I think I love the first-person perspective in the game. But again, it comes down to agency for me. I love giving players agency to go out and make their own choices, their own impact on the world, and to deal with the consequences of the choices that they're making, rather than deal with the things that the game is doing to them. And that's what today's list is all about. Games where things happen to you, where the game is doing things to you. These are my favorite games in that category. It's a weird category because I do enjoy the other form of cooperative game more. But I do appreciate these games, so many different, varied, and very popular games in this category. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you like about these games, what you don't like, and what are maybe your top 3 or 5 games in this category of games where the game is doing bad things. Bad things are happening from the game to you, and you are dealing with those things to the best of your ability. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Yeah.